Great. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining Childcare Aware of Minnesota for today's TEL Talk on Heart-Centered Leadership with Kristen Wheeler Highland, Training, Licensing, Compliance, and Childcare Partner Support Coordinator at Community Action Partnership of Ramsey, Washington Counties. TEL Talks, or Topics for Early Learning Leaders, are monthly webinars for early childhood program leaders to facilitate solutions-focused discussions for your questions about the early childhood field in Minnesota. These one-hour webinars do not meet the standards for a formal professional development training event, and participants will not receive a certificate of completion. TEL Talks are designed as a community building opportunity for leaders to engage and share ideas surrounding a specific content area. We're excited to have moved today's TEL Talk to Zoom in an effort to build community among our program leaders and to enhance conversations around our topics. The TEL Talks team consists of Nikki Lepowski, Quality Improvement Coordinator, and myself, Christy Berg, Workforce Advising Coordinator. Together, we work with Corey Woosley and Katie Hoffman at Childcare Aware to coordinate TEL Talks. Some of our previous topics have included Behavior is Communication, a panel discussion on supporting children and their teachers, and telling the story of early childhood development. Today and in August, TEL Talks is testing out Zoom for our topic, Heart-Centered Leadership. Please visit the career advancement page of our website to view previously recorded TEL Talks. All recordings should be posted within about 2 weeks of the broadcast. After today's presentation, you will receive an email from me along with PowerPoint slides and any other resources shared. Childcare Aware of Minnesota is a resource and referral network for early childhood education in the state. We assist families in finding a quality childcare program. We support the professional growth of early childhood educators with professional development opportunities, eager to learn online training, grants, parent-aware, scholarships, and trainer and RBPD support. We keep the community informed on the importance of quality childcare. Childcare Information Services is a department within CCA that specializes in statewide information sharing and assisting families who are looking for childcare. CCIS sends a welcome packet to new programs, and every 3 years, they survey programs about their business policies and tuition rates. The rates are confidential and can influence CCAP reimbursement rates. CCIS receives calls from program leaders across Minnesota with general business questions and can route you to the appropriate contact person. Childcare Aware partners with Center for Inclusive Childcare, which provides free relationship-based professional development, including support, modeling, and resources to childcare programs throughout Minnesota. A coach will spend time with your program providing support focusing on the successful inclusion of children with challenging behaviors or special needs, implementing health and safety best practices, and/or supporting the unique needs of infants and toddlers in your care. To request support, programs can contact CICC at 651-641-8339 or info@inclusivechildcare.org. Achieve, the Minnesota Center for Professional Development, supports individual, trainer, and RBPD membership applicants and approves courses and training events. The Achieve MNCPD website has several resources to share, including a job board, policy info, membership help, info on how to track down your high school diploma, and a virtual career guide. Visit mncpd.org to see more. The TEL Talks team partners with several organizations to offer coordinated resources surrounding early care and education needs. As usual, participants of TEL Talks are encouraged to use the Ask a Question function. Oh, excuse me, we're going to use the chat box function in Zoom today. You can also raise a hand to indicate if you have a question and we can take you off of mute. You also should have the option to unmute yourself. So please feel free to use either of those options throughout today's broadcast, and we can read your questions and comments aloud too. We'll keep an eye on that chat box. And so we're excited to turn it over to our presenter today, Kristen Wheeler Highland. Thanks for being with us. We'll let you take it over here.
All right, thank you so much. So, hello, it's so nice to see so many faces of people that I know on my screen. I feel like I miss you all terribly. Now that we're finally getting back to doing some things face to face, it'll be fun to see everybody coming up soon. So thank you all for choosing to be here today. Let me get my mine up. And same question right back at you. Is everybody seeing the PowerPoint? All right, perfect. Perfect. So this topic, for anybody that doesn't know me or know my passions, when the team at Child Care Aware reached out and asked me about this, of course I said yes. Leadership and supporting leaders in doing what they do is one of my passions, and being able to do that. So I'm very excited to be here. As Christy told you, you probably just heard that mouthful that is my new title, that I changed and came to work for CAP RW in the short term, what we call it in the short term, back in January. So I have moved over here to St. Paul, and I work for CAP RW. What you're seeing, I blurred it because it's so amazing behind me, is we just started back in physical offices, and I have an entire office that has no personality. So with any luck, anybody that's going to come back in August to be with us for the second half, maybe you'll see a little bit more personality in here by then. I am really hoping. So with that, I want to jump into the topic today. One of the things I'm going to tell you, first of all, I'm pretty sure that everybody has been in a Zoom call before. Thank you, pandemic. And so you know how to operate your controls and know everything that you need to do. So let us know if you need any help with anything. And this workshop today, because those of you that know me know I can't do it any other way, is going to include some interactive elements. And as we come up on them, I promise that I will warn you. But I'm warning you now that you're actually going to talk to each other. And so I just wanted you to be aware of that right from the get-go. So thinking about leadership and becoming more of a heart-centered leadership, one of the first things that I would say is that becoming a heart-centered leader, I know this sounds really hokey, but it's an inside job. And keeping going with the bad puns, I'm also going to tell you that it's not for the faint of heart. The phrase heart-centered has been around for a while now, and it began being attached to leadership somewhere around 2014. So not a brand new concept. It did not become sort of a mainstream concept until several years after that, probably more around 2018, 2019. And as with all good things, it's come into our field now. And so that's why we are going to spend some time talking about this. So for those of you that received the handout ahead of time, this is the first time I'm going to ask you to do a pause and scribble. And if you don't have a handout, I'm going to tell you what the question is. And I want you to just, if you just have a blank piece of paper, you are welcome to, you're welcome to just go ahead and use your own piece of paper. So here's the question. Let me get here. Your first question of the day is, what does that phrase heart-centered mean to you? And I'm going to watch my handy dandy little timer. I'm going to give you a whole 45 seconds. So use your time wisely. Just jot down, what are your first thoughts or responses? All right, I know everyone is amazed that I was actually quiet that long. And I should have warned you at the beginning. One of the other big things about coming back into an office is everyone here is so excited to be physically in an office that they're running up and down the hallway and talking loud. So I apologize if that comes through for you. So I gave you about 45 seconds to record your thoughts about what heart-centered means to you. We are not going to call on everybody, but is there anybody that would like to unmute and share some of the words or phrases or ideas that you jotted down?
Being authentic.
And I put down intrinsic passion for what I am doing.
Leading with empathy.
Kind.
Hello?
We have a comment in the chat box too, relationship focused.
Really caring about what I do.
Thinking about all participants. All perspectives perhaps would be better.
Great. It looks like we got a couple more. Christy, you want to?
Certainly, we have in the chat box genuine, caring, nurturing, empathy, listening, doing something for the right reason.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you guys all for jumping in and sharing. And I want to, what we're going to do for the rest of the time today, and then for those that come back in August, is we're going to explore the what and how to either become, or in most of your cases, especially those that I know in this room, I know you already are, become more of ourselves, more authentic and more heart-centered. So we're going to take the time to do that both today and again in August. So in the business world, the term leader implies the ability to demonstrate some typical skills that you find in all of the leadership information that comes out of business. And here they are. Now I look at that list and I think about our field, and some fits, some doesn't fit. Some of these do not cross from a business world into our profession. They just don't make the cut. And when we think about that. And so here's where, because we know that this is a list from business and we know that our business doesn't fit in here, our world doesn't fit in here, I'm going to give you another question. And here's what we're going to do. I am going to give you about a minute to jot some ideas. And then Christy, I believe, is going to open up the breakout rooms. And we are going to Zoom you right into a breakout room. Now, you don't have to do anything. It will open up. Actually, you do have to do something. It'll open up and on your screen, it'll say you've been invited to join a room. And you just click yes and you go. And when we're ready to bring you back, we will give you a 1-minute warning, and then we will just, you don't have to do anything at that point because the Zoom will dump you right back in here. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to jot down some notes, and then I will ask Christy to send you off.
I wanted to mention too that in the breakout room, the conversations there are not recorded, only the main room is recorded.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that. So does anybody else like hear the Jeopardy theme song when there's that long, quiet pause? Okay, just me? All right, fine. Christy, would you do me a favor and open up the Zoom rooms? And I know that you created them. Click on the button that says open the Zoom rooms. Everybody click on accept and zoom off to the Zoom rooms. All right, Christy, I don't know if there's a couple people that might need to be moved or not, or if you got it all.
Hey, Kristen, I created them. It looks like everybody's there. There's a few
That are just jumping on. Okay,
jumping in and out. Yeah. And so I was trying to assign them to another.
perfect.
Looks like everybody's there mostly so far. Let's see, Chantel and Jess. You're right, it didn't assign them.
They may have had to take care of something and walked away from the computer.
Yeah. It assigned them. There just looks like they're waiting to accept it.
All right, so see how slick that is? You just get thrown right back in here with us. So here you are again. So I hope you had some good conversation going on in the breakout rooms about this whole topic. And I'm going to remind everybody what Christy said, which is we're not recording the breakout rooms. Only this main portion and main room is what's going to make it into the recording as we move forward with all of this. So in the literature that's out there around heart-centered leadership and all of those kinds of things, the heart-centered qualities that are listed. I gave you the qualities that are listed for leadership. The heart-centered qualities include wisdom and courage, compassion, the desire and ability to lead others with true transparency, there's a mouthful, authenticity, humility, and service. So being heart-centered is a process that anyone can do. It's not reserved for just a few. Anyone can do it. And the great news about being heart-centered is that not only can anyone do it, but anybody can do it at any point in your life or your career. And we're going to kind of walk through the steps with this, but it's really a process of getting to know and accepting ourselves first. And we have to get to know ourselves so well that nothing outside of our own self feels threatening anymore. Now, doesn't that sound like an ideal? How am I going to get to the point of knowing myself so well that nothing outside of myself feels threatening anymore? Part of that process that we're going to talk about today is it's about making peace with the fears that we figure out when we do some reflection. And they could be fears in our mind or fears in our heart. And when we take the time to get uber honest, you're going to find fear. You're going to find fear. And most of us spend a whole lot of time pretending we don't have it. Or if we realize we have it, we spend all of our time trying hard to deny it. So we're going to talk about that, but that's one of the very first steps. And so I want to back up a little bit and tell you guys that the idea for this TEL Talk this month and next month began with this reflection from the Exchange magazine. The idea for this was the brainchild of Child Care Aware. And they reached out with this reflection and asked me, because they know I'm a dork about leadership, and asked me if I was aware of this concept of heart-centered leadership and if I might be willing to put something together. And the reflection questions that I'm asking you both this session and next session come into are coming from this reflections article, just so I want to be really clear about that, so everybody knows that it's coming out of this. And this reflections article was written by Nancy Rosenau, and she also wrote a book on heart-centered classrooms. So she took that and elevated it to an article. And I've been wondering if her article on heart-centered leadership is a precursor to her publishing another book, possibly by the same title. So we're going to move on and think about this. Heart-centered leaders, people that are heart-centered as leaders. One of the big things, I talked about fear for a second, and in order to embrace our fear, we have to be willing to come to the place about trying really hard to no longer cover up, to not cover up our realness for the fear about what other people might think. Once we've really dove into this, heart-centered leaders have learned to stop judging any parts of ourselves that we might see as less than or ugly. We move on to a place of greater acceptance and love for ourselves first, and then everyone else in our lives, both personally and professionally. We can't begin to see the best in other people if we are constantly denying what we're best at. If we don't see what we're good at, then we have a hard time seeing other people. So let that sink in for just a second. My first thought is, wow, that's not easy. So it's no wonder that I said at the beginning that this is a process. And we may have to engage in this process over and over and over. This is not a once and done. You may have gotten to the point where you felt like you really understood yourself. You ripped off that like the onion and you peeled back all those layers and you saw into your real heart. And then you've been working and working and working, and you might need to do it again. This is not an invitation to shrug our shoulders and say, great, I'm fine, just the way that I am. No more excuses for me and my behavior. This is actually taking some good, hard time to take a good, hard look into ourselves first, because that's where all of this starts. And it doesn't mean that we're not good leaders. It doesn't mean that every one of you is not a good leader in your own right. You are a great leader. You are good at doing what you do. This is about taking it those next couple of steps. This is not something that we can get a certificate in to hang on our wall. This is not something where we can say, I attended 4 classes and now I'm great. Check. This is a process that we go through at several times in our lives. And because I don't know how to do it any other way, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about my journey through this process and going through this and parallel it with what we know from all of the research and from all the literature. And some of you may have heard some of these before, and that's okay. That's okay. You know that much, and you may know a little bit more about me. So on your screen, you see a picture of a bus. Many, many years ago, a woman by the name of Loretta LaRoche, it was many years ago, it was the middle of the winter, there was an ice storm, and my mother and I were holed up. That's how long ago it was. My mom and I were holed up in our house, iced in, couldn't leave. And this was back when PBS used to run their fundraisers. Anybody old enough like me to remember that, when they used to run their fundraisers on PBS? And that for all of you very wonderful younger people, you actually had to get up and turn the channels on our TV, and we only had 4 of them. But one of them was PBS, and Loretta LaRoche was on. And she is a humorist, but she is also a stress management person, and she works with some of the biggest companies in the country, still does. And quite frankly, pardon my language, but she is funny as hell. And so it made it a lot more palatable to take it in. And so the picture of the bus was this. Loretta said, if you think back to your life, you will realize that when you go through your day, when you go through your week, when you do your job, you hear other people's voices in your head. That does not mean you're crazy, but you hear things like from your very first boss that said, if you're a professional, finish that sentence. There's things like, I can tell you, one of the messages that I got from my mother is that denim is not suitable for the workplace. It's not a professional look. And then when everybody started wearing denim to the office, then the message got a little revised, and it was only dark wash, and never the cute fashionable ones with the cuts and the all those different. No, that's not a professional look, right? My mom rides on my bus. I still do things today because I learned them from my mother. She rides on my bus. And Loretta said, you are the driver of a bus, and they're your first boss or your mentor or your parents, anybody who gave you a message about how to be an adult, about how to be a professional, about how to be a leader, about how to do all the things that go into your job. They're sitting on your bus somewhere. Some of their voices are louder than others, but they're sitting on your bus. And she said, we need to get really comfortable with figuring out who are the people on our bus. We also need to get comfortable with what messages are those people trying to give us. And if those people or those messages no longer fit, pull your bus over and ask them to get off. We need to get them off our bus if what their messages are or who they are no longer fit. So we watched the show and we ended up talking about it. And later, my mom and my brother and I were talking about this whole bus analogy. And my brother looked right at my mom and said, you just need to know, I kicked you off my bus years ago. And my mom started laughing and she said, well, thank God I got tired of driving around in circles anyway. And so we got really comfortable with this idea of who's on our bus and thinking about it. And what I find is I have entered my sensational 60s. I've been around a long, long time. I have been in the early childhood field. There were dinosaurs on the planet when I started. And the reality is I'm still discovering some of those messages that are coming from passengers on my bus. So this is a process and these are layers. So when we decide to take a hard look, we're going to discover that most of the judgments that we fear come from those own internal messages. They're things that we have absorbed through time. I've lived many years of my life looking for acceptance and validation outside of myself. I have come to recognize that I find internally, I am comparing myself to others all the time. There are many of you in this room who I know and who I've known through the years that you can trust. I've compared myself to you. And 9 times out of 10, I find myself going, I wish I could be more like fill in the blank because of something that they've done. I know that that's part of my internal message. And I find myself asking, like, what did they do that I didn't do? Or what do they have that I don't? And all the while, my own internal dialogue is critical and is judgmental. My biggest fear, I discovered, was that others would find out my flaws or other things about me, and you would come to the conclusion that I was not good enough, worthy enough, or fill in the blank for yourself. Anybody willing to just say, oh, that sounds familiar? Have you recognized your own critical internal voice? It doesn't have to be your mother. Doesn't even have to be the same messages, critical messages as mine. I just wanted to use mine as an example. There's actually a name for this. And the name for this is called the imposter syndrome. It's when we have this big fear that somebody is going to find out and see us as an imposter. It could be in our personal life or it could be in our job. When I was a brand new young director, I was scared to death that people were going to find out that I didn't have a clue what I was doing as a director and that I didn't know everything that there was to know. Thus, I sought out mentors and people to help me along the way because I was scared. I was scared that people were going to find out that I don't know. And I handled that differently then than I would now. The irony is that the fear of facing my own internal messages was keeping me stuck in place. It was keeping me from being more effective. And it was keeping me from being the most effective leader that I could possibly be. And it was only when I became willing to let others see my ugly inside parts, my scars, my bruises, the things that I was afraid that I would be judged for, that I began to actually move into a different relationship with leadership. It took me being willing to say, yeah, this is what it looks like. And some of you have been with me since the beginning of that. Some of you have seen some of that internal not so pretty, right, Ms. Kim? Some of you have seen my internal not so pretty parts. And the good news is sometimes you're still around and you stick with me and you don't leave. And that makes me brave enough to continue to share. So heart-centered leaders have to get real. We have to be willing to know our own internal bruises and scars, and be willing. I'm not saying that we're going to do the whole TMI stuff. Anybody who knows me knows I'm already guilty of too much TMI. But it's that willingness to say, I don't know. It's that willingness to say, I'll learn. So in her book, Brene Brown, most of us have run into Brene Brown, and most of us, I suspect, maybe over the pandemic have fallen in love with many things about Brene Brown. But in her book, Daring Greatly, the rest of the title is How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. One of my quotes from her is, courage starts by showing up and letting ourselves be seen. I'm gonna say that again. Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. Today, what that means is that we have to be willing to talk about how we feel sometimes. It also means that we have to be brave enough or courageous enough to ask for what we need. We have to be brave enough and courageous enough to be ourselves, to be kind to others who are trying to be themselves, extending grace. And we need to learn how to be brave and afraid at exactly the same time. You can't be brave if you're also not a little bit afraid. They come together. And Brene Brown is famous for speaking about courage and vulnerability and how the two of them are intertwined. And I love this, her definition about vulnerability. And she says, the feeling that we get during times of uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. This includes times when we're showing our feelings, when we're not sure what people will think, and times when we really care about something, and people will know that we're sad or disappointed when something doesn't work out. Now, if any of you have not gone to see her famous TED Talk, in the handout that I sent you, I gave you links to her TED Talk and a couple of other really good videos that are done by her. And I think that they're both scary and empowering at the same time to look at them. And I don't know about you, but that whole process sounds kind of scary. It sounds a little bit like my tendency to blurt things out. And what we mean here is the ability to be authentic, to put down that shield you carry around and hide behind, and to allow ourselves to truly see not only ourselves, but to be willing to let other people see us. And it's not just our scars and our bruises. It's also, are you willing to let people see your best parts? When somebody says, oh, Lacey, you're so good at that, are you willing to say, thank you? Not, oh, it was no big deal. Not, oh yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do that without a bunch of other people. Now I'm saying if a bunch of other people help, be able to say, I'm going to say thank you on behalf of me and my team. But it's about willing to see those beautiful parts too, and be willing to share them as well. We have a tendency in our field to downplay. We have a tendency when somebody pays us a compliment to do the whole, it wasn't that big of a deal, or we don't stop and just simply say, thank you. Or you want to be really brave. How about, thank you for recognizing that I worked hard on that. What this means is we need more connection, meaning, and joy as soon as we embrace both our less than, and part of our less than is our unwillingness to embrace our good parts, then we can move into more of this. So as I said, in the handout, I added some links to more of that. I could talk about all of that concept of vulnerability and fear for the rest of the week. Rumor has it I don't have that much time to talk about it for the rest of the week. So I included some things in our handout. So does that concept sound true to people? Anybody willing to just raise your hand, or does anybody have anything that they wanted to say?
Kristen, in the chat, we have a comment that says, yes, this is hard. It took me almost a year working with a mentor to learn to say thank you and accept the compliment.
You bet. And we don't see that as being a vulnerability, but not being able to accept praise or a compliment for the work that we work so hard on is a vulnerability. What are we afraid of? I'm guessing that part of what we're afraid of is having somebody label us as prideful, or as somebody is labeling us as self-centered because we're willing to accept a compliment. And interestingly enough, being that vulnerable is not a weakness. So what's next then? What's next for us is that Nancy Rosano, in her article, wrote that she believes that the first and most important characteristic of being a heart-centered leader is the ability to become internal in your self-acceptance. So I'm going to give you another thing to think about. And again, it's up to you. How honest are you willing to be? Think about this for a minute. How does your inner voice speak to you? And then think about if you were talking with your own inner voice as somebody that you care deeply about. I always say, if you were talking to your very best friend, would you talk to them the way you let your inner voice talk to you? So we are going to utilize the breakout rooms again. I'm going to ask Nikki to open up the breakout rooms. She's assigned the people that have been added, and I'm going to throw you back in. You're not going to have a bunch of time this time. You're just going to have a couple minutes, but just what struck you out of this last section? How do you feel about your inner voice? Do you talk to yourself the way you talk to other people? All right, Miss Christy, I'm sorry, Miss Nikki, can you? All right, and they're open. We'll see you in a few. Oh, for a minute, Meredith, I thought that you were giving us Vegas behind you, and I was going to tell you what about Vegas. I love it. I love it. All right, so as you're coming back in, I hope you had good conversations, and you're going to, these things are going to continue to be, you're going to be thinking about these. I told Nikki and Christy, while you guys were in the breakout room, that one of the voices on my bus was an old boss of mine, and I think it will resonate with all of you that are directors. She told me that the reason I was talking to her about asking her to help me figure out which things she wanted me to do in what order, because I wasn't getting them. The 40 hours was not enough hours in a week to do my job. And what she said instead was, yes, it is. You're just really bad at time management. And that critical voice stayed with me for a period of time. And Christy and Nikki asked me if that person was still on my bus or if they tried to sneak back in. And my response, not that this is the best response, but my response is, not only did I kick her off the bus, but I might have run her over with the bus in my brain, because I had to learn that my time management skills are very different, and that I had to accept myself and for what I do and how I do what I do, to realize that they're not bad. They were not like her. And one of the things that that Nikki and Christy were saying, and I absolutely agree with, which is why I wanted to tell you this, is that oftentimes, well, first of all, our inner voice that speaks to you, it leaks out. And that was an example of it leaking out. She was projecting what she was afraid of about herself onto me. And one of the things that we know about those kinds of judgments and critical voices is that we are critical of those things because we're afraid that people see that in us, or we're afraid of that, or we've been told that about ourselves. And so we leak it out to other people. And if your inner voice is highly critical, that's the lens, unfortunately, that's the lens that you use to view other people. because that voice inside is at a particular standard and we're using that with other people, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so one of the things I'm going to tell you, as you see on your screen, is I want you to begin to rein in your critical inner voice and speak kinder to yourself. How do we remind our critical inner voice to sit back down, or to maybe back off and think, how would I say that to my kid? Would I say that to a child in the center? Would I say that to my best friend? Then maybe I need to stop saying that to myself, right? If you want to know what kind of inner voice you have, miss a turn while you're driving and see what you say to yourself. Take the wrong turn, see what you say. Walk by and suddenly catch a reflection of yourself in some shiny surface and listen to what you say to yourself. If the first word was, "Oh, Lord, have mercy, am I a fat chick?" then you might know what your inner voice says, right? Or if you miss that turn and you're saying to yourself, "How could you be so stupid? How are you not paying attention to the details?" That's your critical inner voice. And we don't want that leaking out on other people. So I'm going to encourage you between now and the next time we get together to speak kinder to yourself. Rein in that inner voice and try hard to be kinder. And another vitally important characteristic of being heart-centered as a leader is the ability to make more choices that are motivated by love than fear. Now that sounds all gushy and soft, but the reality is I'm talking like love as in I have love and passion for the job that I do. And therefore I need to like bring that into what I'm doing. I'm not talking about the whole mushy, I just love everyone. I'm not talking about that. Although you can, I don't care, that's on you. But I'm speaking about your general view of the world and the people in it. Do you view people and their intentions as generally positive until you find out otherwise? Or are you suspicious of other people's intentions? How do you view those things? Fear, and let me just say this, I'm going to say it slowly and I'm going to repeat it. Fear and love are always at odds with each other. Fear and love are always at odds with each other. If you are feeling fearful, critical, out of control, if it's hard to see the good, then it's also hard to be happy or see the love or beauty. Because your brain can only handle one of those at a time. They're diametrically opposed to each other. And I'm guessing that fear might feel more like it's negative or it's a weakness. And most of us would not like to admit that we operate out of fear. How many of us would like to say, I spend a portion of my day every day, if you got to see inside me being scared, being fearful? So we don't want to do that. But how many of you in the last day, in the last week, have talked to somebody else about feeling stressed out or out of control? These are the more socially acceptable ways of saying that you're feeling fearful. And the reality is, I'm busting us all. Every time you say, I feel stressed or I feel out of control, there's some element of fear in there. I'm fearful that it's going to continue to be out of control. I'm fearful that I don't know how to get it back under control. I'm fearful that this is where I live and it's quicksand and I'm sinking and pretty soon the alligators are coming, right? That's where we sit with all of that. So I'm going to say something may not fit for you, but if you find yourself using that tone, you know which one I'm talking about. Or if you find yourself snapping at other people or trying to control the uncontrollable, or are you making decisions that you later find out that you regret? Did you make that decision rashly? Did you allow yourself to get riled up? Then I'm going to suggest that if you were completely honest with yourself, there was an element of fear in there somewhere. It might be fear of being found out, right? The imposter syndrome. It might be fear of not having the answers. It might be fear of not living up to somebody else's piece. I always find it ironic. I wrote this training a while ago. I sent it in its written form to Christy and Nikki and Corey and had them review it and see if I was on the right track. And then guess what happened to me just this week? I lost it. I lost it this week, and my ugly came out all over the place because I was feeling completely out of control here at work. And when I sat myself back down and gave myself a little chat, what I discovered was it was that imposter syndrome. Number one, I have been assigned a brand new boss. Some of you may know her. I now work for Kylie Cooper. She's my new boss. And I have this huge, I respect her so much and I hold her in such high esteem. I was afraid that I was letting her down. And the worst part is I was afraid I was letting her down while she's on maternity leave. Like she's not even here. She's at home with her brand new baby. And I was afraid I was letting her down here. And it got in my way. And I had to sit myself back down and give myself a little chat about the fact that I was trying to control the uncontrollable, that I was operating out of that imposter syndrome. I was so afraid that I would let her down that I actually was making some rash decisions, including using some pretty language. And we all know that I deal with stress, with fear, or with humor and sarcasm, and a massive dose of not nice language, never at somebody, but in the general direction. It's a good thing that my office mate has not moved into the office yet, because I said some words. They were short words, not many letters, not many syllables. And I said them all. And I had to come up with that. Now, if I roll the screen back to when I was working with my therapist, actually, and working on the self-perspective thing, my therapist suggested to me that fear is actually an acronym for false evidence appearing real. There are many other, if you look up the acronym FEAR, you'll find a lot of different things, but false evidence appearing real. And that was the one that I've operated from since then. Every time I'm afraid, I have to ask myself, is there false evidence appearing real? And the other thing is, I have to remind myself, fear is part of being a human. Guess what? We can't get out of here without being fearful sometimes. And being willing to name or to face our fears, then we can actually feel more in control. We can have more of what we're trying to get, and we can feel more love. But we have to be willing to say, sometimes I'm not feeling very lovable. Sometimes, if I were completely honest, I'm feeling downright fearful. So, being cognizant of the time, this is where we're going to take a pause today. This is where I'm going to stop and I'm going to leave you. And I'm going to give you a couple of homework assignments. If you choose not to join us in August, you still got the homework. And if you do come back in August, that would be amazing and awesome. And I would like to hear about it. I'm leaving you with a reflection activity and question in your handout. And please do that reflection activity. You're not going to have to report back. We're not going to play school and go around the circle and everybody answer. But where we start next week is based on what you find in that particular activity. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And I'm also going to assign you to start listening to your critical inner voice and see if you can convince it to be a little kinder. And as we get ready to wrap up today, either use the chat box or unmute. Is there anything that's just starting to roll around or resonate that you feel like sharing before we jump off today? All right. I'm absolutely happy, even if we just have to go back and think about it all. All right. Just know that if you're not getting your job done in 40 hours a week, it's not about your time management skills. It might be about your job. So trust me, if anybody has ever told you that, pull your bus over, kick them off.
Kristen, we do have a couple comments in the chat. We have 2 participants who said thank you and a thank you for a wonderful presentation. I have a lot to think about. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. It looks like it's
Yes.
sunny. Go soak up some vitamin D.
Thanks for being here, Kristen. We'll look forward to seeing hopefully everyone back here in August. Be watching for an email coming from Child Care Aware of Minnesota.